I got a trombone in my shop. It has an interesting problem.
The partials were all incorrect and the fundamentals were off, so when I wanted to play something in the first fundamental, it would be like in between partials, so like the tuning would be completely off, and sharps would be a lot sharper than it was supposed to be, and flats would be a lot flatter.
This is a Jupiter trombone. The model number is JSL-536. I'm not the best trombone player in the world, but it's not supposed to sound like that. Then when I depress the valve, let's see what happens. Get the same terrible noise. So obviously something's wrong with the trigger. I'm going to check out the rotor and see what I find. First I'm going to pull off the valve cap. When you pull off the rotor cap, you should see the, they're called witness marks. There's one there on the rotor, and then there's one on the rotor cap right there. And those should line up, and that lines up just fine. You depress the valve and it goes a little too far, but it shouldn't create that big of a problem. Since this instrument just came back from another music store for repair, then it makes me start to wonder if they might have done something wrong. So I'm going to check for something that they might have done wrong. Since the witness marks line up at least somewhat, I know that there's another problem. And a hint I have is this mark here. Now usually there's a mark on the rotor cap and then another one on the casing, and it usually is not at the 45-degree angle like that. Usually it's here, 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 or here, and not off to the side. So I'm going to look around and see if I can find that other mark. And there's the mark right there. So there's a mark here and here. Those aren't lined up. So I'm going to line those up. When I do, these aren't going to even come close to lining it up. I think what happened is someone lined up the rotor plate to the witness marks rather than lining up the witness marks to the rotor plate. Now I'm going to pop off the rotor plate. So to do that, you just take a dowel, tap on it, and then it just pops right off. Now if you line up the rotor plate to the casing, it's way off. I'm going to pop out the rotor. I'm just going to unscrew the screw, the short little screw, and then it just popped right off. Sometimes it doesn't pop off so easily. Pull out the rotor. The little notch right there. It's supposed to line up with a little bump inside of the rotor arm. It should go together like this with those two lining up. You see that little mark on here? That mark is not supposed to be there. So I think what happened is when they put it together, they just put it like that, not lining it up, and then they just screwed it down really hard, and that made the little divot in there. But the problem was, it was off around 135 degrees, and that's about the same amount that this rotor plate was off, about 135 degrees. So I'm pretty sure that was the problem. Now it's time to put it back together. I'm just going to put some oil on this. You put a heavy oil on the rotor spindle, and then there's a lighter oil, just regular rotary valve oil. You put a couple drops of that on the face of the valve. You put it in, then you put a few more drops of the heavy oil on the other spindle. I have a tool to tap the rotor plate back in. You don't need this, but it helps. It's just a dowel with a hole drilled in it, and then the face is flat. And then you just put it on there, tap it in. And then after you tap it in, you always make sure that the lines are lined up. Then you check the rotor, see if it turns. This one does not. That's very common. What you do is you just put the rotor cap back on, tap it lightly, tap this, there we go, works great. Then you put on the rotor arm, And of course you have to be careful to line it up. I can see how they got it wrong because there's not a lot to work with here. I'm just going to take the dowel and tap it in very lightly. A lot of times you don't need to do that, but on this one you did. And those are lined up, so that's good. I'm going to put the screw back in. Snug but not too tight. Now before I hook up the linkage, I'm just going to port the valve. It's called porting when you make sure that things line up right. This one is good, but this one goes a little too far. It should be there, it should stop there, but it goes a little farther than that. So what I need to do is put a little thicker bumper right there. So I'm just going to put the bumper where it should be. I replaced the bumper and it doesn't go quite far enough, so I'm just going to take a razor. I'm going to take a razor and cut off just a little bit. Everything lines up, so I'm going to put the linkage back together. Just pop that on there. Then there's a little set screw here. You just tighten it up as far as it needs to be tightened without making it stick. If you hold on to the rotor and push the trigger, there shouldn't be a lot of play there, but it should still work. That functions well. Doesn't make a lot of noise, so we're all set. Now I'm going to play test it. We'll see if it sounds a little better than it did before. Works well. The bell section works well, and now I'm going to check out the slide section. Trombone slides can be very tricky at times because a lot of times it looks like they should work, but then they still don't work. I like to see trombone slides slide out at about a slight angle of 5-10 degrees. Usually they don't though. This one, well, that one almost had to be straight up and down before it slid out. So this one needs a little bit of work. I'm just taking a rag, I'm going to wipe the slides off and go put it in the chemicals. I'm just going to clean the sides out. I have a long brush here. Let's see what comes out when I run water through it. Not too bad. I've seen a lot worse. I think the most disgusting one I've ever seen, I ran the cleaning rod through it and then I got this big pile of brown and nasty rotten stuff in the sink. I almost threw up when I saw that. Obviously someone didn't clean out their trombone good enough. Thankfully this one's a lot better than that though. Now that it's clean, I want to see how it works. Sometimes just cleaning it makes it work altogether. Usually not, sometimes. Let's see. Oh, slightly better than it was. But not too much. So now I'm going to check for bent slides. You close one eye and you hold it up to a fluorescent light. And then you just look down, you sight it like you would a gun barrel. You try it one way and then the other. These slides aren't too bad, but they're bad enough to cause problems. I worked on the slide and it slides out like that now. A lot better than it was.
Yeah.
I didn't show you everything there is to know about trombone slides. There's a lot more that I didn't show you, but the purpose of the video is the rotor. So maybe some other time, if you're interested, I can show you some trombone slide work.
Yeah, it's a lot better. That's a lot better.
Rotors are a mystery to a lot of people, so I'm going to sacrifice this trombone here. And no, it's not the one that I'm working on. This is a different one. It's one of mine. I'm going to sacrifice this trombone to take away the mystery of rotors for you. Now I will say it's not much of a sacrifice because it's in pretty bad shape. A hacksaw to a trombone. I feel evil doing this. I finished my destruction of the trombone, and my apologies to all the trombone players out there. I'll make it up to you with a good video though. Here's the F attachment section of the trombone, and I cut away this portion of the rotor. And this is what we're left with. If you're not pushing on the trigger, then it just puts the air right through and then out the bell. Then when you press this down, it runs the air through here and then all the way through the tubing, which equals 5 positions on a trombone. So if you're in 6th position, it's the same as being in 1st position and holding down the trigger. And you have a lot more versatility with the F attachment that way, and you can also play a little lower. There are a few more notes you can get on the lower end. So anyway, once it goes through the tubing, the ports run it through here and then out that side and then through the bell. And then you get all the noise, hopefully good noise. This rotor is correctly ported. You can see right there, it lines up so that there's not a lot of disturbance in the airflow. Also, when the trigger is pressed down, it also lines up, although it's harder to see that. If it wasn't cracked, you could just take a razor and cut the little rubber stoppers just a little bit, or if you needed to, you could also put a thicker rubber stopper in there. If everything lines up right, then the witness marks should also line up, and they do. If the valve is rotated 45 degrees, it's going to make a big mess of the air as it goes through there. It's also going to leak into the F attachment side of the instrument, and it's going to sound really bad.